The mining colony on the edge of the star system was always quiet at night. The long tunnels below the surface hummed faintly with machinery, and above, the endless sky was filled with distant stars. For Myra, the silence was heavy. She had grown used to it during her years on the outpost, but sometimes it pressed against her heart, reminding her of how alone she really was. Myra worked long shifts in the maintenance bay, fixing broken panels and keeping the life support system steady. It was not glamorous work, but it was necessary. Without people like her, the colony could not survive. Still, when her shift ended and she returned to her small quarters, she felt the emptiness most. There was no family here, no old friends, only colleagues who kept their conversations short and practical. One evening, after a long day of struggling with a faulty generator, Myra sat on her narrow bed and stared at her communicator. She wanted to speak to someone, just someone who could understand her worries. Her closest friend lived on another colony far away. Myra searched her memory for the code, typed it in, and pressed the call button with trembling fingers. The device rang once. Twice. Then the line opened. "Hello," a deep voice answered, calm and steady. Myra froze. That was not her friend's voice. She looked at the code again. Had she entered it wrong? Her eyes blurred with the tears she had been holding back all day. She almost hung up, but something about the voice made her pause. I'm sorry," she whispered. "I must have called the wrong number." There was a silence, then the man said gently, "It's all right. You sound upset. Are you okay?" His tone was not sharp or impatient like most strangers would be. It was soft, almost kind. Myra's tears slipped free. She had not meant to cry, but the concern in his voice broke the wall she had built around herself. "I'm just tired," she admitted. "Work is hard, and it feels like no one cares. I didn't mean to bother you." "You're not bothering me," the man replied. "Sometimes, a voice in the dark is exactly what we need." Myra took a shaky breath. The words felt unusual, almost poetic, and she could not help but answer, "You sound like you know what that's like." There was a faint chuckle on the other end. "Yes. I know it very well." The conversation should have ended there. She should have apologized again, disconnected, and tried her friend's code one more time. But instead, Myra stayed. The stranger did not rush her. He simply asked simple questions about her work, her day, her dreams. She found herself talking more than she expected. "My name is Myra," she finally said, almost embarrassed to reveal it. "I am Kiran," he answered. His voice carried a quiet strength, like someone used to being listened to, though he never made her feel small. For nearly an hour, they talked. Myra told him about her childhood on Earth before her parents moved to the colony. She spoke of how she sometimes wished she had chosen a brighter path, maybe studying science or art instead of mechanical repair. Kiran listened, never interrupting, sometimes offering small words that made her feel seen. "You fix the machines that keep others alive," he said once. "That is not small work, Myra. That is important." She smiled at that, wiping her cheeks. It was rare to hear such appreciation. When the call finally ended, Myra lay back on her bed, her heart strangely lighter. She still did not know who Kiran was, and it felt strange that a mistake had brought them together. But as she drifted to sleep, she realized she did not feel as alone as before. The next day, she tried to focus on her duties. The generator was finally running smoothly, and she moved on to repairing cracked vents. Yet, in the back of her mind, she kept thinking about the stranger. Would he be there if she called again? Would he even want to talk to her? That evening, she held the communicator once more. Her finger hovered above the buttons. It was foolish, she told herself. He might not answer, or worse, he might think she was desperate. but her heart reminded her of how kind his words had been. Finally, with a deep breath, she dialed the same wrong number. The device rang once. Twice. Then came the familiar voice. Myra. Her lips parted in surprise. You remembered my name. Of course, Kiran said warmly. How could I forget? And just like that, Myra felt the heavy silence of the colony fade away. In its place was something new: connection, fragile yet real, formed across the stars by nothing more than a wrong number. The second call felt different. Myra sat straighter on her small bed as Kiran's voice came through the communicator. She had not realized how much she had wanted to hear it again until that moment. His calm tone carried across the distance, filling her quiet room with warmth. I wasn't sure if you would call again, Kiran said softly. I wasn't sure either, Myra admitted. But, it felt nice, talking to you last night. I felt the same, he replied. Silence followed, not the uncomfortable kind but a silence that made Myra feel understood. She closed her eyes, listening to the faint hum of the colony systems outside her quarters. For the first time in months, the sound did not seem heavy. Kiran asked about her day. Myra described the small repairs she had done: the cooling fans in the southern tunnel, the air filters in the dining hall. She laughed lightly when she explained how one of her tools slipped and almost fell into the vent shaft. You sound different tonight, Kiran noticed. How? She asked. Lighter. Like you are smiling, he said. Myra hesitated, then smiled to herself. Maybe it's because of this call. It feels good. They continued talking. Kiran rarely spoke about himself, but when he did, his words carried depth. He mentioned traveling often, though he never said where. He spoke of stars that Myra had never seen and described them as if they were old friends. Do you travel for work? Myra asked, curious. Something like that, he said. I visit many places, but I rarely stay long. It can be lonely. Myra's heart softened. She imagined him, somewhere far away, looking at the same stars she sometimes gazed at during her night shifts. The thought made her feel connected to him, even across the vast distances. That night, before ending the call, Myra said, "Thank you for listening. I don't usually talk this much. And I don't usually listen this much," Kiran answered with a gentle laugh. "But I'm glad I did." When the call ended, Myra found herself smiling at her communicator. It was strange: she barely knew him, yet she felt she had known him for much longer. Days passed, and the calls became a quiet rhythm in her life. After her shifts, Myra would return to her quarters, prepare a small meal, and then reach for her communicator. She would dial the same wrong number, and Kiran's voice would answer as if he had been waiting for her. They spoke about everything. Myra told him about her childhood garden on Earth, where her mother used to grow flowers even in poor soil. She described the smell of the rain and how she missed it on the dry colony. Kiran listened carefully, sometimes repeating her words as though memorizing them. A garden, that must have been beautiful. I cannot remember the last time I stood among flowers. What about you? Myra asked one evening. What do you miss? There was a pause. Then he said quietly, I miss having someone to talk to without wondering what they want from me. Myra tilted her head. What do you mean? Most people want something: information, favors, promises. It is rare to meet someone who speaks without expecting anything in return. Myra thought about that. She had never considered that loneliness could follow even those who seemed to have everything. His words stayed in her heart long after the call ended. One evening, while working in the tunnels, Myra found herself humming a tune. A fellow worker noticed and said, You seem cheerful these days, Myra. She flushed, realizing she had been smiling more often. She did not explain why. Some things were too fragile to share, and the calls with Kiran felt like a delicate treasure she did not want others to disturb. Later that night, during another call, she told Kiran about the comment. "So they noticed?" Kiran asked with amusement. "Yes," Myra admitted, laughing softly. "I didn't realize I had changed." "Perhaps happiness shows itself even when we try to hide it," Kiran said gently. Myra grew quiet. Happiness. It was a word she had not connected to herself for a long time. As the days turned into weeks, Myra began to wonder more about who Kiran truly was. His voice carried knowledge and calm, but also a hint of mystery. He spoke of trade routes, distant colonies, and technologies she had never heard of, yet he never explained his role. One evening, when curiosity pressed too strongly, Myra asked, "Kiran, who are you really?" The line was silent for a long time. She thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, "Someone who is glad you called the wrong number." Myra laughed softly. "That doesn't answer my question." "Perhaps one day, it will," he replied. His answer left her with more questions than before, but instead of frustration, she felt intrigue. Who was this man who spoke as if he carried both the weight of the stars and the gentleness of a friend? That night, as Myra lay in bed, she stared at the faint glow of the stars through her small window. For the first time since she had arrived on the colony, she did not feel forgotten. Somewhere out there, across the endless dark, someone was listening. Someone remembered her name. Someone made her smile. She whispered into the silence, "Good night, Kiran." And though he could not hear her, it felt as if he did. Myra's days moved in a quiet rhythm. She worked in the tunnels, repaired machines, and returned each evening to her small quarters. But what she looked forward to most were the calls with Kiran. His voice had become part of her life, like a star she could always count on finding in the night sky. They spoke of simple things: her work, his travels, and the stars beyond their colonies. Yet, the more they talked, the more Myra noticed something unusual. Kiran's knowledge of the galaxy was not ordinary. He knew details about trade routes, energy systems, and new inventions that even the colony engineers had never mentioned. One evening, after finishing a long shift, Myra leaned back against her bed and asked, "Kiran, how do you know so much about these things? Yesterday you explained the new solar engine before the colony reports even announced it." On the other end, he chuckled softly. "I read a lot. I keep my eyes open." "But it's more than that," Myra pressed gently. "Sometimes it sounds like you are there before the news even spreads. Like you see things firsthand." There was a pause. Then he said, "Perhaps I do. Perhaps I have a way of being close to the center of things." Myra frowned, thoughtful. His answer only deepened the mystery. Yet she did not feel afraid. Instead, she felt curious. As days turned into weeks, Myra began to test her suspicions. She would ask small questions, watching how he answered. "Do you know about the colony near Aran 5? She asked one night, pretending it was just casual talk. "Yes," Kiran replied without hesitation. "Their water system failed last month, but it has already been restored with new filters." Myra sat up straight. She had heard nothing of this. Even her supervisors had not mentioned it. "How do you know that?" Kiran's voice grew quiet. "I make it my duty to know when people are struggling." The words lingered in Myra's mind. Duty. It was not the answer of a simple traveler. One night, after a particularly heavy day, Myra felt bold enough to ask directly, "Kiran, are you some kind of official? A council member? Or something else?" He laughed gently, though it was not mocking. "You ask dangerous questions, Myra." "I don't mean to," she said quickly. "But sometimes I wonder who I've been talking to all this time. You know so much, yet you never say what you do." For a long while, There was silence. Myra's heart raced. Had she gone too far? Would he end the calls now? Finally, his calm voice returned. The truth, Myra, is not simple. If I told you, you might see me differently. And I do not wish for that yet. Myra blinked. See you differently? Why would I? Because most people do, he answered softly. When they learn who I am, they stop speaking from the heart. They speak with masks. But you talk freely, as if I were anyone. Myra hugged her knees to her chest. That's because you are anyone to me. You're just Kiran. The voice that listens. For the first time since their calls began, she thought she heard him take a slow breath, almost relieved. The following evening, Myra shared more of herself than usual. She told him how she often dreamed of leaving the mining colony. She wanted to see the stars, not just through her small window, but up close. Sometimes I feel trapped here, she admitted. Like I'm fixing parts of a machine that will never change. But when you talk about the stars, it feels possible. Like maybe I could go. You can, Kiran said firmly. Humans are not meant to stay in one place forever. We are explorers by nature. Even if the galaxy forgets that, we must not forget ourselves. The way he spoke stirred something in Myra's heart. His words carried more weight than simple comfort. They sounded like belief, like faith in humanity itself. She whispered, "You make it sound so easy." "It is not easy," he said. "But it is possible. And you, Myra, have the strength to reach for more than tunnels and machines." She smiled, though her eyes watered. No one had ever said that to her before. Later that week, Myra overheard two engineers discussing a trade ship that had visited the system. They mentioned its owner in hushed tones, a wealthy figure who controlled fleets and industries across several colonies. No one ever saw him in person, but his influence reached everywhere. Myra's heart skipped. Could it be? The thought felt unreal. She tried to dismiss it, but when she spoke to Kiran that evening, she could not stop imagining him as more than just a voice. "Kiran," she said slowly, "you always speak of people needing honesty, kindness, and connection. If you truly were powerful, would you still feel that way?" His voice softened. "Myra, I am powerful, yes. But power is nothing if it cannot bring comfort to a single soul. And right now, your voice brings more meaning to me than any fleet or fortune ever could." Her breath caught. He had never spoken so directly before. Though he had not said it plainly, Myra finally understood. Kiran was not an ordinary traveler. He was someone far beyond her imagination. And yet, in that moment, he was simply the stranger who had answered her call. That night, Myra could not sleep. She lay awake, staring at the faint glow of the stars outside her window. A part of her wanted to know everything about him, to uncover the full truth. But another part whispered that perhaps it did not matter. Because, powerful or not, Kiran had listened. He had cared. And for Myra, that was enough. For now. White heavy check mark. The colony night was colder than usual. Myra sat in her room, wrapped in a thin blanket, waiting for the familiar voice that had become her comfort. The communicator buzzed, and when Kiran answered, she felt the warmth of his presence fill the lonely space once again. But tonight, his tone was different. He sounded careful, almost as if he had something heavy to say. "Myra," Kiran began, "I think it's time you knew more about me." Myra's heart skipped. She had wanted this moment for weeks, but now that it was here, she felt nervous. "Why now?" she asked softly. "Because," Kiran said after a pause, "you've spoken to me with honesty. You never asked for anything, never tried to gain from me. That is rare. I cannot hide behind silence forever." Myra listened closely, gripping the communicator as if the weight of his words could slip through her fingers. I am not just a traveler, Kiran continued. I am responsible for many trade fleets, industries, and colonies. Some call me a leader, others a merchant, but the truth is simpler. I was born into wealth that grew across the stars, and I used it to build more. Myra, I am what many would call a billionaire. The words hung in the air. Myra sat frozen. She had expected something unusual, yes, but this? She had never even met someone who owned more than a single ship, let alone entire fleets. You're serious, she whispered. Yes, Kiran answered calmly. I know it sounds distant from the world you know. That is why I never said it before. People change when they hear this. Their voices change, their hearts close. I did not want that to happen with you. Myra's thoughts spun. She remembered the quiet tone he had used when speaking of loneliness, the way he had said most people wanted something from him. Now it made sense. People must have approached him only for favors, wealth, or influence. No wonder he had guarded his truth. But she also remembered the night of her first call, the tears in her eyes, the kindness in his voice. Back then, he had not been a billionaire to her. He had simply been Kiran, the stranger who listened. Taking a steady breath, Myra said softly, You're still the same person to me. You listened when no one else did. That matters more than what you own. For a long moment, Kiran said nothing. Then his voice grew quieter, gentler. You don't know how much it means to hear you say that. The following evenings, their conversations felt even deeper. Now that the truth was open, Myra dared to ask about his life. What is it like, she asked one night, to be in charge of so much? Kiran sighed. It is heavy. People look at me and see only what I can give them. They forget I am human too. I have fears, regrets, dreams just like anyone. Myra nodded. I think sometimes people forget that about anyone with power. They forget the human part. You never forgot, Kiran said gently. From the beginning, you spoke to me as if I were just another voice in the dark. That honesty, it gave me something I thought I had lost. Myra's chest warmed at his words. It felt strange, hearing someone so influential speak as if her presence mattered that much. Yet, deep down, she believed him. Still, questions lingered in her mind. Why had fate connected them? Why had her wrong call reached him, of all people in the galaxy? One evening, unable to hold back, she asked, Do you ever wonder why I called you that night? Out of all the numbers, out of all the stars, it was you. I think about it every day, Kiran admitted. Sometimes life surprises us with chances we never expect. Perhaps it was an accident. Or perhaps it was the galaxy's way of reminding me that even the most powerful man can feel alone, and that comfort may come from the most ordinary corner of the stars. Myra's eyes softened. I'm not extraordinary, Kiran. I'm just me. And that is why you are extraordinary, he said quietly. The next day, Myra went to work as usual, but the tunnels felt different. She looked at the old generators, the cracked vents, and the worn panels, and she thought about the galaxies beyond. She thought about Kiran, a man who carried so much, yet found peace in their small conversations. For the first time, she began to imagine a life beyond the colony. A life where she could see the stars, travel to places she had only heard about in his stories. The dream felt fragile, but it was there, glowing like a tiny light inside her. That night, before ending the call, Myra said, Kiran, thank you for trusting me with the truth. You were the first person I felt safe enough to tell, he replied. Then I'll keep it safe, Myra promised. On the other end, Kiran was silent for a moment. Then he said with quiet emotion, Myra, sometimes I think you don't realize what you mean to me already. Her heart skipped. She wanted to ask what he meant, but the line clicked softly, and the call ended. Myra lay awake, her thoughts racing. What had begun as an accidental call had turned into something far greater than she could ever have imagined. And now, knowing the truth about Kiran, she wondered what path the stars were leading them toward. Myra could not stop thinking about Kiran's words. Each night when she closed her eyes, she remembered the quiet way he had said, "Sometimes I think you don't realize what you mean to me already." She replayed it over and over in her mind. Could he really mean that? Or had it been just a kind phrase, spoken in the warmth of the moment? Myra was not used to such closeness. On the colony, relationships were simple, practical, never wrapped in the mystery that surrounded Kiran. The following evening, she hesitated before making the call. Her finger hovered over the communicator for a long time. What if things changed now? What if the truth about his wealth and power created a wall between them? But her heart reminded her of his kindness, his patience, and his humanity. Finally, she pressed the button. When his voice answered steady, warm, familiar, her doubts began to melt. "Myra," Kiran said, almost with relief. "I was hoping you would call. You sound different tonight," she noticed. "I've been thinking," he admitted. "For so long, I've hidden behind walls of business and distance. But with you, I want to step beyond those walls." Myra's heart fluttered. "What do you mean?" There was a pause, then Kiran spoke carefully, as though choosing each word. "I would like you to see my world, even if only a small part of it. There is a star station not far from your colony. I can arrange for you to visit safe, comfortable, no pressure. Only a meeting, face to face." Myra froze. Her chest tightened with both fear and excitement. To see him, truly see him, it was something she had imagined in quiet moments but never expected to be offered. "I don't know," she whispered. "I've never left this colony since I was a child. What if it feels too big? What if I disappoint you?" Kiran's voice softened. "Myra, you could never disappoint me. Do you think I am asking this because of what you look like, or what you have? No, I am asking because your honesty has become the most important part of my days. That is all. I want to see face to face the person who reminded me I am human." Her throat tightened. For a long moment, she could not answer. Then, with a shaky breath, she said, "Let me think about it." "Of course," Kiran replied gently. "Take all the time you need. I will wait." That night, Myra lay awake, staring at the dim ceiling of her room. Her thoughts raced. Could she truly step outside her small world? She had always been the one who fixed broken panels and tightened screws, the one who kept her head down. Meeting a man like Kiran, someone who lived among stars and fleets, felt almost impossible. And yet, part of her heart longed for it. Not because of his wealth, but because he had seen her, really seen her, when she had felt invisible. The following day, Myra's co-workers noticed her distraction. "You've been smiling to yourself again," one of them teased gently. Myra only laughed it off, but inside, her decision was forming. She could not keep hiding behind fear. Perhaps the galaxy was bigger than she had allowed herself to believe. Perhaps her place in it was not limited to tunnels and dust. That evening, when she called Kiran again, her voice trembled but carried determination. "I'll come," she said. There was a silence, then a breath of relief from the other end. "Myra, you don't know how glad I am to hear that. But only for a visit," she added quickly, her nerves bubbling. "I just want to see." "That is enough," Kiran promised. "I will make the arrangements. You will be safe, and nothing will be asked of you. All I want is to meet the person who changed my nights." Myra's cheeks warmed. She tried to hide her smile, though he could not see it. The days leading to her journey passed slowly. Myra felt excitement and fear mixing inside her. She told no one the truth, only that she had a small break from work and would be traveling to a nearby station. In her heart, she guarded the secret carefully, afraid it would lose its magic if shared too soon. When the day finally came, a sleek transport ship arrived at the colony's port. Myra had never seen such a vessel. Its design was elegant, its surface shining like liquid metal. The pilot, polite and quiet, welcomed her aboard. As the ship lifted from the colony, Myra pressed her face to the small window. The tunnels and dust she had known all her life grew smaller and smaller until they were nothing but a dot. The stars stretched around her like an endless ocean. Her chest tightened, not with fear but with awe. For the first time, she was leaving the place that had bound her for so long. When the transport finally docked at the star station, Myra stepped out, her heart pounding. The station was larger than anything she had ever imagined: bright corridors, flowing lights, people of many kinds moving with purpose. And then, at the far end of the docking bay, she saw him. Kiran. He was not just a voice now. He was real, a tall man with calm eyes and a presence that carried quiet strength. He was dressed simply, not with the richness one might expect of a billionaire, but with ease and dignity. For a moment, Myra stood frozen, afraid to move. But Kiran smiled, a smile that reached his eyes, warm and genuine. "Myra," he said, his voice the same one that had carried her through countless nights. "Welcome." And in that instant, all her fear melted away. Myra's steps were slow as she crossed the docking bay. Her heart beat so fast she thought it might echo in the bright corridors. Kiran stood waiting, his posture calm, his eyes warm, just as his voice had always sounded. For weeks he had been only a voice across the stars, but now, here he was, real, human, smiling at her. "You came," Kiran said softly. Myra nodded, her throat dry. "I said I would." For a moment they simply looked at each other. Myra expected the silence to be awkward, but instead it felt peaceful, like an old friendship meeting the sunlight for the first time. Kiran extended his hand. Myra hesitated, then placed hers in his. His grip was firm yet gentle, steadying her nerves. "Come," he said. "There is much I want to show you." He guided her through the station. The place was alive with movement: workers, travelers, merchants, and voices from many colonies blending together. Myra's eyes widened at the sight of great windows showing the stars beyond. She had never seen space like this before. It was breathtaking, endless. Kiran watched her quietly as she pressed closer to the glass. "Beautiful, isn't it?" "It feels bigger than I ever imagined," Myra whispered. "I thought I knew the stars, but I only saw them from my little window." "You were never meant to see only a corner," Kiran replied gently. "You were meant to see the whole sky." Myra turned to him, her eyes shining with wonder. For a moment she forgot who he was: the fleets, the fortune, the mystery. He was simply Kiran, the man who wanted her to see more than tunnels and dust. Later, he brought her to a quiet lounge, away from the noise of the station. They sat across from each other, and for the first time, Myra noticed the small details about him: the calm lines of his face, the way he leaned forward slightly as if he always wanted to listen, not just speak. "I was afraid," Myra admitted, her hands twisting nervously. "Afraid that meeting you would change everything. That you'd be different." "Am I?" Kiran asked softly. Myra studied him. "No. You're the same voice. The same kindness. Just real now." He smiled, a look of relief flickering across his face. "And you, Myra, are exactly as I imagined: stronger than you think you are." Her cheeks warmed. She lowered her eyes, but inside, her heart swelled. Over the next hours, they walked the station together. Kiran showed her the gardens maintained inside, a place where green trees and flowers grew under artificial sunlight. Myra stopped in awe, her breath catching at the sight of blossoms she had not seen since childhood. "I told you once about my mother's garden on earth," Myra said softly, touching a flower's petal. "I never thought I would see something like this again." Kiran watched her closely. "I remembered. That is why I brought you here." Myra looked at him, her chest tightening. He remembered everything she had told him, even the smallest details. But with wonder came doubt. As they walked back through the corridors, Myra asked the question that had weighed on her heart. "Kiran, why me? You could speak to anyone. People who are smarter, richer, more important. Why spend your time with someone like me?" Kiran stopped, his gaze steady. "Because you never asked for anything. Because when you spoke as Myra, not as someone who wanted something from Kiran the billionaire. To you, I was only a voice. And for the first time in years, I felt human again." Myra blinked, her eyes stinging. She wanted to believe his words, and deep down, she did. But a small fear still whispered, what if she wasn't enough for his world? As if sensing her thoughts, Kiran added gently, "Do not measure your worth by wealth or status. What you gave me was far greater. You gave me sincerity." Myra swallowed hard. She had never been told such words in her life. That evening, as the artificial lights dimmed to mimic night, Kiran led her to a balcony overlooking space. The stars stretched endlessly, glittering like rivers of light. "This," he said, his voice quiet, "is what I wanted you to see. Not riches, not ships, not stations. Just the truth of it, the galaxy itself. And in this vastness, the smallest human voice can still matter." Myra stood beside him, gazing at the stars. For the first time, she felt something shift inside her. She was not only a worker from a forgotten colony. She was human, and that meant something. She whispered, "Maybe humans are stronger than we think." Kiran looked at her, his expression gentle but full of meaning. "Yes, Myra. And you are proof of that." As the night ended, they stood side by side, the silence comfortable between them. Myra felt the fragile bond of trust grow stronger, as if the stars themselves had woven it into place. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, but in that moment, she knew one truth: she had not just called the wrong number. She had found someone who saw her, truly saw her, in a galaxy that often forgot people like her existed. And for Kiran, she was not another voice in the crowd. She was the voice that had reminded him of his own humanity. The space station's artificial dawn spread gentle light through the wide windows. Myra stood at the balcony again, watching the stars fade as the station rotated. She thought of her first call, the call made with tears and hopelessness, and felt almost unable to believe where she was now. Behind her, quiet footsteps approached. Kiran's voice carried calm warmth. "You did not sleep much." Myra turned with a small smile. "I was afraid I would wake up and find this was only a dream." "It is no dream," Kiran said. He walked beside her and looked out at the stars. His presence was steady, as if he belonged to both silence and conversation. Myra let her breath out slowly. Yesterday felt like a lifetime. Gardens, the station, the stars. I never imagined I would see them all. "You will see more," Kiran said softly. "If you choose to." His words made her heart flutter with both hope and doubt. Could someone like her truly walk in his world? Later that day, Kiran invited Myra to a private council chamber within the station. The room was simple, lined with maps of trade routes and colonies, but its importance was clear. Here, decisions that shaped the lives of thousands were made. "I want you to listen," Kiran told her gently. "You may not think it now, but your voice matters." Representatives from different colonies entered, people who looked tired, worried, burdened by their duties. They greeted Kiran with respect, but Myra noticed how they softened when he introduced her not as a guest, but as someone whose opinion he valued. During the meeting, talk circled around supply shortages, broken systems, and unequal trade. Myra listened quietly at first, afraid to speak, but the sound of weary voices stirred something inside her. She remembered the long tunnels of her own outpost, the faces of miners who dreamed of sunlight. Finally, when a debate grew heated, Myra spoke without planning to. Why not share resources fairly, instead of letting one colony fall while another prospers? If you let smaller places weaken, you weaken all of humanity. The room fell silent. Every eye turned to her. Myra's hands trembled, but Kiran gave her a steady nod. Encouraged, she continued, her voice clearer. We are far apart in space, but we are still one people. If we forget that, we lose what makes us human. The words hung in the air, simple yet strong. One by one, the representatives nodded. A few even smiled faintly, as if reminded of something they had long forgotten. Kiran's gaze held quiet pride. You see why I value her voice, he said firmly. Myra sat back, surprised at herself. She had spoken not as a guest, not as a miner, but as a human being who believed in unity. In the days that followed, Kiran began making changes. With Myra's encouragement, he used his resources not to grow richer, but to strengthen weak colonies. Medical ships were dispatched to distant outposts, new gardens were built in barren stations, and fairer trade agreements were signed. People across the colonies whispered of the change. They spoke of Kiran, the reclusive billionaire who had suddenly turned his empire into a shield for the forgotten. But more than that, they spoke of a woman named Myra, the one who reminded him of humanity's strength. Myra felt shy hearing her name mentioned. She never wanted fame. All she wanted was fairness for people who lived in shadows. But she could not deny the quiet happiness in her chest when she saw hope returning to faces around her. One evening, Kiran and Myra walked through the garden again. The flowers glowed softly under artificial light, and the air carried a gentle fragrance. You changed everything, Myra said softly. No, Kiran replied, shaking his head. You did. You reminded me why I began building all this, to protect, not to dominate. I had forgotten that. Your call woke me. Myra looked at him, her eyes reflecting the garden lights. But I only called by mistake. Kiran smiled faintly. There are no mistakes in the heart. Perhaps the stars themselves chose to connect us. Myra laughed quietly, though her eyes grew warm. She thought back to that night of tears, and the voice she had never expected to answer. How far that single call had carried her. As weeks passed, their bond deepened. Kiran found peace in Myra's honesty, and Myra found courage in Kiran's faith in her. They were different in many ways, one born to wealth, the other to struggle, but together they formed something rare, a partnership built not on power or riches, but on trust. When people saw them, they did not only see a leader and his companion. They saw hope that humanity could be more than divided colonies, more than forgotten workers and unreachable rulers. They saw proof that even in the vast silence of space, a single human voice could still change everything. On her last evening at the station before returning briefly to her own colony, Myra stood again at the balcony. Kiran joined her, and for a long while they simply watched the stars. You will come back? Kiran asked, his tone quiet but full of meaning. Yes, Myra said without hesitation. I will come back. Because now I know where I belong. The stars stretched endlessly before them, vast and eternal. But between them stood two humans who had found something stronger than distance, stronger than wealth, stronger than fear. They had found each other. And together, they would remind the galaxy of what it meant to be human.